Dajahan, hi guys, it's Renee and welcome back to my channel, and today I am reacting to ErHa Volume 2, or like reacting, I'm doing a read along for Volume 2. Sorry, I'm thrown because there was just a dog that sounded like it was in a lot of pain, and I really hope nothing's wrong with it. And it seems like the neighbors have something under control. I don't know, I'm a little bit worried. Because yeah, that was, oh goodness, I don't know, for me, like, yeah, okay, sorry, okay, let me try and resense myself. um so today we are going to be continuing the read along for ErHa Volume 2, and we're almost done with it. It's like we have about 70 pages left to go, so I think it's gonna take today, like full today, 2 hours, and then a big chunk of tomorrow's 2 hours. But I think there will be like enough time for us to just kind of like do a quick recap on how we're feeling about the volume afterwards. So yeah, that is the plans for this weekend's read along. And then originally I was planning on starting with volume 1 of Scumvillain next weekend, but we might be going away on like a short vacation holiday thingy. So if that's the case, then I will be postponing the start of Scumvillain to the weekend after that one, if that makes any sense. But yeah, okay. Hi. So now that I am a little bit less confused, let's quickly see. So for anyone who is gonna be following along on like in their own books, we are on page 408. Let me just check. Um, no, 409. We are in the at the scene break that ends with "For you do not return never again." Okay, so that's where we're at. As usual, I am gonna be taking my like 10-minute break on the hour to just like get new water and stretch my legs. Um, but other than that, I think we can more or less get started because I know I've kind of been making you guys wait because I was waiting for things to resolve with the dog. But yeah, okay. So now that all of that is out of the way, let's get started. Also, I forgot to say I had a dentist appointment this morning, and it's been like a few hours since then, but my mouth still feels a little bit strange. So if I like fumble my words a little bit, that might be why. So yeah, sorry, please bear with me. I'm gonna try my best not to have it inconvenience the reading. Okay. But why had the weapon that had accompanied him through endless battles in his last life appeared in this world reborn? And how had it ended up at Shenyang Pavilion auction? Before Moran could think on it further, all the thousands of cultivators at the auction house released streams of spiritual energy, each rushing to commune with Bugwei. Moran watched mutely. I'm wondering because, like, it's not just the fact that it appeared at the auction when it really shouldn't have. It appeared already named, which should be impossible. So I'm wondering if it's not a fake version of Bugwe that was drawn from somewhere in Moran's consciousness, because like it would stand to reason that if this person bonded with a wood element weapon in this lifetime and he has this memory of another spiritual weapon, then obviously, that weapon would also be a wood element weapon. So I'll just copy that weapon and send it out to the auction, which would explain why it would then have the name that was only bestowed to it a few short, like a really short while um, before things went wrong in the past life. Okay. It would be no use, since it was Bugwe, and since Moran was here. Under no circumstances would any other person in the world be able to command that long blade. Did its appearance have something to do with the little bastard hiding behind the scenes? If so, then his decision to release Bugwe into the world at that time meant that he knew Moran and Chuaning were trying to track him down, and that his goal wasn't in fact to test other people's spiritual essences. Then what was he trying to do? Furthermore, was this Bugwe real? Or was it a mere bait, like those fakes at Jincheng Lake? Mind filled with questions, Moran reached out with a tendril of his own spiritual energy. If Bugwe wasn't fake, then it would surely resonate with him. If he wanted to avoid notice, he wouldn't let the resonance be too obvious. So if you only used a little bit. He had just released the tiniest thread of energy when a faint groan came from behind him. Shizun? Moran whipped his head around to find Chuaning collapsed at the table, brows locked and lips blue. His snow-white robes spread out like smoke, and his handsome face was paler than frost. He had passed out, his eyes screwed shut like some chronic illness had flared up within him. Moran had never expected something like this to happen so suddenly. He panicked, pulled back his spiritual energy, and ran to Chuaning's side to cradle him in his arms. Shizun, what's wrong? Oh, goodness. Now I can't help but wonder if maybe, like, the thing that is causing Chuaning to become, like, miniaturized Chuaning has something to do with them, like, having interlaced spiritual energy at this point because of the weapon that they share. I'm making a lot of things up. I have no basis for any of it. I just am wondering how things could potentially connect to explain some of the things that we've seen happening so far. And if I feel like him withdrawing his spiritual energy from Chuaning unknowingly in order to reach out to the sword might account for the sudden illness of Chuaning. Um, Raja Thapa? Welcome to memberships. I hope I pronounced your name right. If I didn't, I'm really sorry. Okay. Outside the fragrance inn of... Oh, wait, hold on. Chapter 82, This Venerable One Can't Believe It. Outside the fragrance inn of Rainbow Isle stood its willowy innkeeper, all dressed up with pearl bracelets clinking on her wrists as she leaned against the door, eating melon seeds fried in snake gall. Whenever Shenyun Pavilion held an auction, most of the visitors ended up staying at her place, since she was clever on top of being pretty. A flicker of those beautiful eyes, and she could easily guess what her guests desired. It was just past noon, and the sun beamed brightly overhead. The innkeeper spit out some melon seed shells. The auction would be over in another 2 hours or so. The inns on Rainbow Isle were all fairly expensive, and visiting cultivators tended not to stay, so she didn't expect to make much from the rentals today. That was all right. These cultivator heroes and whatnots still had to eat before leaving, and so she fully intended to squeeze them for dinner. She flicked some bits of fruit peel off her skirt, then turned to yell at the waiter inside. "Erfu, wipe the tables and chairs down again, and fetch a basket of the melon seeds I fried. Put a plate on every table. Gotta get ready for our guests tonight." "All right, boss, right away." The waiter jogged off. Done with her sunbathing and snacking, the innkeeper grinned contentedly. She was about to head inside to supervise the work when she noticed a fast-pacing black and white silhouette at the end of the road. Once it drew closer, she saw that it was a handsome cultivator dressed in black who was holding someone in his arms. Nigh instantly he burst into her inn at full tilt, and in a burning panic, a room, room, room! The waiter gaped. Maybe because the cultivator had appeared so suddenly, and because he was acting so strangely, the waiter could only stare at him in bewilderment, mouth hanging open. "I said I want a room," Moran roared angrily. "What are you, deaf? Where's your boss?" "Ayo, Shinjun." The voice of a young woman came from behind him, a little simpering and a lot apologetic. A voice at which it would be hard to stay mad. Moran turned around and came face to face with the innkeeper's agreeable smile. "My apologies for the wait. He's new. I'm the innkeeper. Please feel free to come to me if you need anything." With his dark, handsome eyebrows raised, Moran hurriedly repeated, "Give me a room." The innkeeper looked him over quickly and discreetly. The cultivator was wearing a cloak, so he was probably an attendee of the Shunyan auction, but the hood had fallen off in his haste to reveal a handsome face that still had a trace of tender youth. That wasn't important. What was important was the brocade pouch embroidered with a giant tortoise that was tied around his wrist. It was a Chunkin pouch from Shunyan Pavilion, one they specifically gave to patrons to allow them to carry purchased goods. The innkeeper's eyes gleamed. The cultivator had no money. The cultivator had money. Lots of money. I don't like this because, I think Moran is gonna be too panicked to, think about the fact that she's gonna be taking advantage of him. Next, she glanced at the person in his arms. He was covered in a cloak and his face was turned away, so she couldn't see what he looked like. But the innkeeper's eyes were keen as a hawk, and they swept over the snow-white robes made of high-quality silk before zeroing in on the hand peeking out from a wide opening of his sleeve. Long and slender, porcelain fine skin, delicate fingertips, shapely joints. A beauty. The innkeeper understood immediately. Sure, this was a beautiful man, but it wasn't like dual cultivation between men was unheard of in the cultivation world. Nothing to write home about. Really? Okay, I guess so. Oh, goodness. Dafu, open a room. The innkeeper wasted no time and asked no questions. Her orders were brisk as she snapped her fingers. "The best one we have." Chuaning's sickness had come suddenly and without the slightest warning. It was a good thing they were in Guye territory, where good medicine and physicians were readily available. The sage doctor's eyes were closed as he took the pulse in Chuaning's wrist with lightly calloused fingertips. For a long time he didn't utter a single word. Moran could hold it no longer. "Doctor, how is my Shizun?" "It's not a pressing issue, but Moran seriously couldn't stand people who talked in circles and beat around the bush. "But what?" he pressed, eyes wise. "But it's quite strange. Your master's cultivation is remarkable. He's at a level achieved by few in the world. Yet my careful examination has revealed that his spiritual core is exceedingly fragile, even more so than that of a fledgling cultivator still in the foundation establishment stage. If cultivation was water, then the spiritual core was the vessel holding that water. Where one's cultivation accrued slowly over time, one's spiritual core was inborn. It was easier for someone with an innately powerful core to cultivate, but once one's cultivation reached a certain point, it would begin to bolster that core. Generally speaking, cultivation and core were interdependent and complementary. An eminent zongshi like Chuaning should naturally have an extremely robust core, so physicians generally didn't bother to check such a thing when taking his pulse. Moran was shocked. "How is that possible?" "I thought the same. However, I checked over and over, and it was the same every time. My Shizun's spiritual core is weaker than a fledgling cultivator's? How could that be possible? There is no way. Could you please take another look? Maybe you made a mistake somewhere." I have always been more cautious in my practice, and I have never said anything of which I am not absolutely certain. If the young Shizun doesn't believe me, then feel free to get a second opinion. The result will be the same." Moran was stunned. "The issue has arisen precisely because your master's spiritual core is so fragile," the doctor continued. "He appears to have recently suffered some sort of influence from a powerful weapon, one that has some sort of resonance with him, yet does not belong to him. He experienced a rebound as a consequence of that resonance, then lost consciousness because his core couldn't withstand it. I will prescribe some medicinal concoctions. Have him take them and have plenty of rest. He will be fine." Moran saw the doctor off and came to sit by Chuaning's bed with his cheek propped up on a hand, watching him in a daze. A weak core? How was that even possible? However, while the old man couldn't possibly have known what had happened at Chunyun Pavilion, he had correctly summarized that Chuaning had encountered a powerful weapon. He likely wasn't spouting nonsense. Oh, goodness. Moran stared at Chuaning, brooding while his thoughts tied themselves into big old knots. He didn't know how much time passed before Chuaning's brows scrunched up, his eyelashes quivering like he was having another nightmare. Moran reached out and gently smoothed his brow, though he had no idea what compelled him to do it. "Shizun?" Chuaning did not respond. "Shizun." "Chuaning, I've already lived 2 lifetimes, but could it be that there are still things about you that I don't know?" "I mean, you will just have to wait and see, I guess. A part of me is like kind of hoping that maybe if we're very, very, very lucky, which we don't often tend to be with this story, that the fact that he now is aware of Chuaning's like weakened core will make him more caring towards Chuaning. Am I hoping for too much? Probably. Okay, I need another pillow. In short order, the innkeeper finished boiling the medicine in the inn's kitchen and came upstairs to deliver it. Moran tasted it, ridiculously bitter, as expected. Chuaning hated bitter things. Moran sighed and called back the innkeeper, who was about to leave. "Innkeeper, do you have anything sweet?" We make fresh sugar candies, but today's batch is all gone. I can send someone to go buy some if Shenzhen would like." Moran looked at the steaming medicine and shook his head. "Never mind then. The medicine will be cold by then, and it has to be taken hot to be effective. Thanks, though." Why is my brain like this? My first thought was like, are you gonna feed it to him? No problem. Please feel free to call me if you need anything else." Having said that, the innkeeper tactfully left, closing the door on her way out. Moran carried the medicine over and set it down by the bed, then sat at the edge with one hand on his knee. He reached out with the other to help Chuaning up. "Shizun, it's time for your medicine." Moran had plenty of practice feeding Chuaning medicine from his past lifetime. He held Chuaning in one arm so that his Shizun leaned against him, then scooped up a spoonful of the medicine with his other hand, blew it cold, and slowly fed it to him. Okay, never mind. When he thought about it now, this was the second time since his rebirth that he'd taken care of Chuaning. He disliked this person, yet he felt such unease whenever he got sick. He really couldn't understand it. Bitter. Despite being unconscious, the man in his arms could taste the medicine. Chuaning's eyebrows were pulled together, and he turned away, refusing to drink any more. Moran was used to this behavior. Holding another spoonful, he tugged Chuaning back around and coaxed him patiently. "One more. You'll feel better after. Here," and fed him another spoonful. Chuaning coughed up half of it. Brows furrowed even more. "So bitter. It's sweet. The next one will be sweet. Come on. Come." The next one. Promise. It's unbelievably sweet. This venerable one sent people to find the sweetest syrup in all the land. Moran just can't get over the tendency to call himself a venerable one. It's kind of hilarious and so ridiculous at the same time. Moran was so distracted cajoling Chuaning into drinking the medicine that he forgot himself for a moment and absent-mindedly let words from his past life fall from his lips. It's delicious. You'll regret it if you don't open up. Come on. Just like that, he managed to sweet-talk Chuaning. Can you guys hear that? Oh my word. Just like that, he managed to sweet-talk Chuaning into drinking the whole bowl. After the last spoonful, Chuaning let out a breath and was about to get up and tidy things when there was a sudden flash of white. Before he could react, a slap landed soundly on his cheek. "You liar! Get the hell out!" Chuaning snapped. Then his head drooped and he went right back to sleep, leaving Moran with his mouth hanging half open, pitifully holding his cheek. He was about to get mad when the man in his arms groaned softly, like he was dreaming about something distressing, his face pale. When Moran saw him like this, he just couldn't be angry. He didn't have any candy, but his gaze landed on the gurkun pouch. Why did I say it like that? Chienkun pouch, sitting at the head of the bed. Struck by a sudden idea, he took out a bottle of taper fragrance dew. Then he tapped Chuaning's cheek with his hand, not too gentle, but not too hard, and let that count as revenge. "Wait here, but I'll go make you some sweet dew water to drink." Chuaning didn't respond, so Moran moved to lay him back down. But when he leaned closer in the process, he heard a low exhale and a slurred mumble. "It's wronged you." Moran froze. "What?" Chuaning's eyes were tightly closed, and his eyelashes shivered unceasingly, as if he was enduring something excruciating. Blood drained from his face bit by bit. He seemed to have fallen into another dream, one that was even more frightening than the last. He shook his head minutely, an uncharacteristically sorrowful expression appearing on his habitually impassive face. It was I. For a split second, Moran's heart stuttered erratically. A strange feeling flooded his chest, as if there. Oh goodness, I didn't even check if the audio is okay. I'm hoping the audio is okay. I'm assuming someone would have let me know if it wasn't. A strange feeling flooded his chest, as if there was a secret right in front of him, from which he was separated by only one layer of haze. A secret he was on the verge of unveiling. Staring fixedly at Chuaning, he asked quietly, "You what?" "It was I who wronged you." Moran felt suddenly disorientated. He didn't know if the dim light of the candle was making him see things, but he thought he perceived a glimmer of wetness amidst Chuaning's thick eyelashes. "It was I who wronged you." The words left Chuaning's lips as light as mist, but they hit Moran with all the force of a crashing thunder. Moran abruptly shot up from the bed and went stiff. His pupils contracted into pinpoints as he stared in disbelief at the man on the bed. Instantly his expression changed. His heart pounded like a stampede of horses, and hands clenched tightly into fists. In one moment he felt the blood in his body catch fire, and in the next it froze over. "What did you say? What?" After a moment of being paralyzed in shock, Moran seized Chuaning by the throat, his eyes flashing with danger. The guise of guileless naivete that he had worn since rebirth vanished into thin air. "Chuaning, what did you say? Say it again! Say it again!" "It was I who wronged you. I won't blame you in life or in death." It was a curse that Moran could never forget, a nightmare that had haunted him for 2 lifetimes. How many times had he closed his eyes only to hear those words sighed by his ear, though the speaker was long gone from the world. These words that Chuaning had spoken in their past life only as he lay dying. So why now would he? Why would he? Unless Chuaning had also been reborn? No, unfortunately not. I think it would have been easier for us if that had been the case in some way, shape, or form. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Okay, what time is it? Cool. Chapter 83. This Venerable One wants you. Okay. The ludicrous thought made Moran see red. Reason had left him. He shook uncontrollably as his hand tightened around Chuaning's throat, pressing for a response with a deep-voiced roar. If Chuaning said the rest of it, if he said in life or in death, then there could be no doubt. No doubt. A stifled groan by his ear. Chuaning couldn't breathe. His face flushed from the lack of air as he as his struggles weakened. Moran stilled, madness and clarity clashing one another across his red-tinted, wide-open eyes. Before he snapped out of it and hastily let go. Chuaning slumped heavily back on the bed. The 5 stark stripes of finger-shaped bruises against his neck gradually returned Moran to his senses. He opened his mouth, wanting to say Shizun, but it wouldn't come out. He tried to say Chuaning, but his voice failed him there, too, until finally, hesitantly, he uttered hoarsely, "You." Moran's throat was parched, as if it had been scorched by fire. He swallowed with difficulty while retrieving the scattered pieces of his rationality. Scenes from the days prior flashed before his eyes. In this lifetime, Chuaning had never behaved strangely. There was no way he could have been reborn. Yes, that is very true. Okay. Then why had he said those words? He was his dying words from their past life. It was I who wronged you. Why now, at this time? Hadn't Chuaning only uttered those words to save Xu Meng? To save those sanctimonious cultivators? Weren't they empty words that he had said merely because he had no other choice? Moran had never believed, had never wanted to believe, that Chuaning would genuinely admit his wrongdoings to his face, that he would actually say something softly, compassionately to him. No matter what, Chuaning had obviously been lying. He obviously detested Moran. No matter what, his Shizun had always looked down on him, had never treated him with sincerity. Moran didn't regret killing him at all. He didn't regret. Moran turned away, slowly closing his eyes. He didn't want to stay here a single second longer. What did it matter to him if Chuaning lived or died? He turned to leave. He wanted to leave. His feet refused to move. It was I who wronged you. In his memories, in the end, that cold, handsome face had looked gentle even when covered in blood. At the edge of Kunlun Heavenly Lake, this man had lain in a pool of blood and slowly lifted a hand to poke Moran's forehead. His fingers had been cold as ice, yet there had been warmth in those phoenix eyes of his. Moran had been sure back then that he was only seeing things. I won't blame you, in life or in death, Chuaning had whispered, even as a trail of blood dripped slowly from his eyes. Moran. The man on the bed murmured in his dream, just 2 quiet syllables, and the one he called to began to tremble all over. By the time Moran realized what was happening, he was standing at the bedside, one hand bracing against the headboard, as he leaned over Chuaning, staring fixedly at his pale face. This is kind of breaking my heart right now. I'm trying so hard to keep it together. Those thin, lightly colored lips opened slightly to say again, Moran. Closing his eyes, Moran drew his brows tightly together as his fingers dug into the cold, hard surface of the quaint's wood, as if he was striving to restrain something. Ultimately, he couldn't, and it came out in a raw whisper. Chuaning, did you mean it? Everything that you said, did you mean it all? His chest hurt so terribly that it felt like it might explode. There was no way Chuaning had also been reborn. If he was saying these words now, it could only mean that at this point in time, in his heart, he already felt remorse for how he treated Moran. Did he mean it? Chuaning was only talking in his sleep, so of course he didn't answer. Even so, Moran waited and wished for one. No response. For a long while he waited with his eyes closed, but there was only silence. Moran sighed quietly and reluctantly opened his eyes, only to be unexpectedly met by a pair of hazy, half-lidded phoenix eyes, caught between wakefulness and slumber. He didn't know when Chuaning had raised his lids, but it was clear from his expression that he wasn't truly awake and aware. This was only a momentary stirring between bouts of torment. That pair of eyes, the color of the night sky, were vacant and glazed, as if they held eternity. Yu Hung of the night sky was always lightning sharp. He rarely looked so disorientated. Without his habitual keen edges, the man lying there looked unexpectedly beautiful. The corner of his eyes were tinged with a faint red as he gazed at Moran unguarded. This is so painful for so many reasons because, like, it very much feels as if Moran, like, likes Chuaning, but the conscious part of him doesn't yet appreciate Chuaning for Chuaning's full self. Moran felt a violent tremor in his heart and a tightness in his throat. Voice low, he murmured, "You." Chuaning looked much too like he was when they made love in their past life. Something stirred inside Moran, and for a moment he felt as if he was still at Wushan Palace and Chuaning was his prisoner, his personal plaything. The thought made his mouth dry and his breaths grow heavy. I can't. I don't like him. Don't touch him anymore. The sins of bygone lives are sins of the past. In this life we're nothing more than master and disciple. And so Moran stayed as he was, looking down at Chuaning with one hand braced against the headboard, preventing himself from crossing that line. His hair pooled over his shoulder from where it was tied in a ponytail, the tips brushing the pillow. Chuaning lay there, fully dressed, his long hair spread loosely about him. At first his expression was dazed and insensate. I've never heard that word. And some time passed before Moran's reflection slowly appeared in his eyes. Chuaning hesitated. Then, as if still caught in the clutches of his nightmare, unable to discern when and where he was, he slowly reached out with a hand that for a moment paused in midair, and at last touched Moran's brow. "It was I who wronged you." He spoke the words with an uncharacteristic gentleness, the way he had in their past life. Something inside Moran collapsed with a resonant boom. Blood boiled and head feverish. All the sense and rationality he had worked so hard to retrieve fell apart in an instant. Without thinking about it, he gave in to the familiar desire. He leaned down and ravenously captured those slightly parted lips with his own. The past came crashing back in a wave, melting their surroundings away like snow and frost. Moran felt as if he were back at Wushan Palace amidst silky red satin, illuminated by the light of candles, gilded with dragon and phoenix. Beneath the crimson drapery, this man was struggling and spitting curses, panting and humiliated, yet unable to escape, helpless against his unyielding grasp. The noise that Chuaning let out between the slides of warm. Okay, I'm about to start cringing. I can Just see it. Okay. We can do this. Uh, um, Sly's warm witness drove Moran mad. All those words about not liking him, hating him, and never touching him again, all of it vaporized into thin air. Moran felt as if he had never yet died, that the lightly quivering body beneath his still belonged to him. He wanted to kiss Chuaning, to hold him, to humiliate and torment him until this lofty, immaculate man was unable to take it any more, until he was crying and begging to be had into oblivion. Chuaning, Ran murmured hoarsely, a wave of heat rolling through him, washing over his very soul. Even the tips of his fingers felt like they had caught flame. Once again he closed his lips over that cool, soft pear, which still tasted slightly of the bitter medicine. The beating of his heart was like the thunder of drums inside his chest as he kissed with abandon, mad with desire. Ran knew this person through and through. Since his rebirth, he had been loath to be intimate with Chuaning because of the resentment he harbored towards him, but kissing him now was pure ecstasy. It was a high so intense that it ate away at him, like the first taste of sweet dew on the tongue of a traveler dying of thirst in the desert, like being enveloped in a soft warmth of fur coats heated over the fire in the bitter cold of a freezing night. Moran had thought that he would surely have nothing to do with Chuaning in this reborn life. Yeah, no, that's not gonna last. He hadn't expected to ultimately succumb to his desires, to be driven to lose control after a mere few words, to kiss him like this. If it were not for the fact that he couldn't get Chuaning's robes open, and in trying to do so was pricked by something that fell out of his Shizun's robes, Moran might have given in and taken Chuaning right then and there without any thought. Consequences be damned. Clang! Something metallic pricked Moran's finger and fell on the bed. It rolled a little before coming to a stop. Moran was far too turned on to mind the scratch. He only threw an irritated glare at the object before turning back to Chuaning's ridiculous robes. It was one thing when he kept his distance and didn't touch him, but now that he was on top of his Shizun, the feeling from his past life came rushing back. The mere thought of how Chuaning's smooth narrow waist had felt under his hands made him unbearably hot and heavy. But Chuaning's silk white robes were impossible to remove, almost like they had been enchanted with some kind of spell. Rand cursed under his breath and slammed his fist against the headboard before resentfully climbing off the bed to go fetch his blade. He would make short work. Oh my word. This man's like, no, no, no. I will not be intimidated by a mere piece of cloth. Where the hell am I? He would make short work of the thrice-wrapped belt sash. As he sat up, he saw the fallen metallic object out of the corner of his eye. He didn't pay it any mind at first, but then a bolt of clarity flashed through his arousal-idled mind. Moran stilled. His neck snapped around to take another look at the thing. It was a golden hair clasp, vibrant, colorful, and decorated with orchids. It's the oh no, 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 no. He's gonna. Why must he put together the fact that it is Shasini and Chuaning is the same person at this moment? Like why? I, um. Okay, hold on. Let me just see what's going on here. The new sect just come back June 7th. Song kick it. 4 new genres, new jackets. Oh, okay. Where was I? It was a golden hair clasp, vibrantly colorful and decorated with orchids and butterflies, the very same one that he'd bought for Shasini at Peach Blossom Springs after days of saving up feathers. He had personally pinned it to Shasini's ponytail and to cheer up his sullen little Shidi, saying, "Little kid should wear lively colors like red and gold." Moran picked up the hair clasp. He stared at it in a stupor, feeling like he'd been doused with cold water. Hang on. What did this mean? Why would Chuaning have something that Moran had given to Shashini? Could it be? The frightening thought crossed Moran's mind. He turned round slowly, and his gaze, still dark with desire, landed on Chuaning. Shizun had passed out again. Moran stared at his face, taking in those lips, reddened from his kisses, and his heart skipped a few beats. No way. Absolutely not. He had to be out of his mind. Was Chuaning not messing with him? Was Shasini seriously Chuaning's son? Moran shuddered at the thought. His head was about to explode. I mean, I guess that would make more sense for him to leap to than the thought that it was Chuaning in like disguise all along. Okay, where are we? Okay, we have 15 minutes left before I take my break, so let's see how much we can do. Chapter 84. This venerable one stole a kiss and you don't even know it. When Chuaning woke up, it was to the sight of Moran staring into the middle distance at the table with his cheek propped up in his hand. The reflection of the candle flame flickering in his pitch-black eyes brightened his vacant gaze. Chuaning thought about getting up, but there was no strength in his limbs, and he had to surrender. The patterned lilac curtains wafted. He turned on his side, watching Moran without a sound. The silly boy remained lost in thought, ignorant to the fact that his Shizun was awake. Who could blame him? Anyone who found out that their lover already had a son with some other woman would be equally shocked. Was Shashini really Chuaning's child? How could that be? Chuaning was so aloof and particular. What woman could hope to catch his eyes? Besides, if this whole thing was for real, then he must have had a kid in the past life too. But in all the years that he had spent with Moran in that life, Chuaning couldn't have been further from what one would expect of a married man, both in his daily conduct and between the sheets. Moran. But how else was he to explain the golden butterfly hair clasp? Moran banged his head against the table in anguish, about to lose his mind from the sheer confusion. He wasn't that smart to begin with. The way this book roasts Moran, I cannot. He wasn't that smart to begin with, and he had never been able to wrap his head around the twisty-turny things. The more he thought, the more his head hurt, until he finally grabbed his skull and flopped onto the table with a despairing "ah," and stayed there, unmoving. "Moran, what are you doing?" asked an even, soothing voice, pleasant like the chime of scattered jade, though the undertone was slightly hoarse. Moran instantly bounced up in surprise. "Shizun, you're awake?" Chuaning coughed lightly before looking up at him. "Is this Rainbow Isles Inn?" Yeah." Moran stood and moved towards the bed, where he noticed a small tear in Chuaning's lower lip. His face swiftly turned red as he remembered how he had lost control in his lust-induced haze and had very nearly made a serious mistake. "What is it?" Chuaning asked upon noticing his perturbance? I'm not sure. Perturbation. Oh my word, okay. Nothing. Moran waved his hands and hastily changed the subject. "Anyway, Shizun suddenly fainted at a Shenyang pavilion, so I brought you here to rest. Then I got a physician to look at you and prescribe you some medicine. And then I heard you sleep talk, was reminded of some past affairs, couldn't stop myself, and kissed you." That part he thinks and doesn't say out loud. Of course he couldn't say such things. Moran trailed off. his gaze uncharacteristically frantic, even flustered. When Chuaning heard that he had been examined by a doctor and saw the strange expression on Moran's face, his heart dropped. Had Moran learned of the poison that had turned him into a child? His hand subconsciously tightened on the quilt as he rasped, "What did the physician say?" "He said Shizun was affected by that holy weapon, and that's what made you faint." Moran hesitated. "Shizun? Your spiritual core. Don't worry about it. It's just a bit weaker than average." Moran blinked. He was thinking about the scars that lay over both Shun and Chuaning's hearts, and considered the possibility that there was some kind of connection. However, the way Chuaning spoke of it, that didn't seem to be the case. He couldn't help asking, "But how? Shizun is so powerful. There's no way your spiritual core could have always been so frail. When did this happen?" "A long time ago. I was injured once, many years in the past, and it's been that way ever since." Chuaning waved his hand indifferently. That wasn't what concerned him. "Did he say anything else?" Moran shook his head. "Nope." Chuaning considered him in the dim haze of the candlelight. "Then why were you banging your head on the table?" For a long moment Moran was mute. He tried and failed to hold it in, so he threw caution to the wind and produced the golden butterfly hair clasp from his sleeve. He set it in Chuaning's palm. "I found this." Chuaning did not reply. "On you." The hair clasp glinted in the light as Chuaning's heart sank lower and lower. So he had been found out after all. He sighed quietly. A few moments passed in silence, neither of them speaking. Finally Chuaning closed his eyes and was about to come clean when he heard Moran mumble in a small voice, "Shizun, is Shah Shidi truly your son?" You know, I kind of hate the fact that Moran is so silly sometimes, because if he was just a little bit quicker on the uptake, half of these things would not be concerns, but at least it's a consistent character trait. Chuaning was struck utterly speechless. He opened his eyes, and the blood that had been frozen in his veins began to circulate again. For a while he didn't know what to say as he stared silently at Mo Wei, who was stood by the bed with a complicated expression. Then slowly a clear verdict formed in Chuaning's gaze. "Moron." Guys. "That's right." Chuaning lifted a hand and calmly took back the hair clasp before Moran could react. "Didn't I tell you before? Why are you asking again?" Moran buried his face in his hands. "I'm just making sure." Yet despite Chuaning's repeated confirmations that Shah Shini was indeed his flesh and blood, Moran didn't quite buy it. Shoving down his intense feelings of dismay, he decided to grill Shah Shini about it the next time he saw his little Shidi. Until those two actually acknowledged their blood ties to one another, he would sooner die than believe it. Yeah, and luckily that's never gonna happen, because they're never gonna be at the same place at the same time. After a bit of rest, Chuaning recovered some strength in his limbs and moved to sit up in the bed. "My clothes." He ran a hand over his collars and paused, frowning. "Why are they so dishevelled?" Moran hurriedly steered the topic away, fearful that Chuaning might remember some fragments of his earlier behavior. "Shizun, you must be hungry, right? I heard the food at this inn is pretty good, especially the Wensi tofu. Let's go down and get a bite. My treat." Chuaning shot him a cold look. "What? With the money I gave you?" He still shook out his voluminous sleeves and opened the door to go downstairs. The Rainbow Isles cuisine was similar to young Zhu's, light and refreshing, with a tendency toward sweetness, and very agreeable to Chuaning's taste. By now the auction was over, and many of the attendees had already left. Moran and Chuaning had also requested a private booth, so that there was no longer much need to wear cloaks to conceal their identities. After they took their seats inside, a waiter came and poured them each a cup of Belluchin green tea. I've never heard that. Then handed them a menu before retreating. Shizun, come look through the menu first. You can order. I'm pretty content with all Jiangnan-style dishes, Chuaning said as he lifted a cup and took a small sip of tea. His brows furrowed as soon as the tea touched his lips, and he paused. What is it? Too hot? It's nothing. Maybe the weather is dry. My lips are a bit cracked. Yeah, let's go with that, Chuaning. Chuaning touched the corner of his mouth uncertainly. Weird. When had that happened? Man lowered his head in guilty silence. It would be a while before the food was ready, so Chuaning took the time to discuss the events of Shenyang Pavilion with Moran. They had left early, so they didn't know who'd won the holy weapon in the end, but that wouldn't be too hard to ascertain if they asked around. As they conferred, an assortment of young Jura dishes began to cover the table. Chuaning felt like they had reviewed all that they could of what they knew, so he stopped asking questions to look over the food lining the table. He paused for a moment before lifting his eyelids slightly to glance at the person across from him, whose smile was a tad nervous. Have you been to Jiangnan before? Chuaning asked. Moran had, of course, gone to see the apricot blossoms and misty rains of Jiangnan in his previous life. However, he hadn't forgotten that he was only 17 at present, and he had only joined Sesheng Peak about 2 years ago, so he immediately shook his head instead. Nope. Chuaning's eyelashes lowered back down, his expression neutral as he said in a clear voice. But you ordered all the best dishes. Moran started. Only then did he realize that he had ordered every single dish, in accordance with Chuaning's preferences. This man is such a sucker for Chuaning, I wish he would just realize it. His only thought had been to make sure Chuaning ate well so that he could recover his strength. He had entirely forgotten that he shouldn't be familiar with the local cuisine. I worked in the kitchens of a pleasure house when I was young, he said, so I've heard of these dishes, even if I haven't tried them. Luckily, Chuaning didn't press the issue. Let's eat. Freshwater fare was a big part of Jiangnan cuisine, especially on Rainbow Isle, where there were baskets of crab and shrimp and strings of fish as far as the eye could see. The square beach table was naturally laden with seafood. Crispy fried eel with sauce poured over it, sweet and sour squirrel fish? Okay. Crunchy without any tender. And crunchy and what? Crunchy without and tender within. Okay. My brain did not want to comprehend that sentence. Steamed mantis shrimp, chrysanthemum sauteed sea snail, and braised silver carp. It smelled heavenly. Aside from those, the meat and vegetable dishes were just as exquisitely made and elegantly plated as were the desserts. There were stewed crab meatballs, savory pork trotter jelly, shredded tofu simmered in chicken broth, soup dumplings, wensu tofu, and more. Oh my word. Okay, that is a lot of food. With his cheek in one hand, Moran watched the waiter set the last dish down, osmosis cake, and snuck a glance at Chuaning, wondering which dish he would go for first. He pondered for a moment, and secretly placed his bet. Definitely the meatballs. These were Chuaning's favorite young drawer dish, after all. Sure enough, as soon as the dishes were all out, Chuaning's chopsticks reached unhesitatingly in that direction. Moran sighed to himself. This guy is always so predictable. Be it in how he eats or what he does. It's always the, okay, I don't want, let me just guess that it's not going to be the thing that he thinks, or maybe, if I'm very lucky, he's going to first play, like, put something in Moran's plate, and then it won't be as predictable as he thinks. Plop, an adorable plump meatball landed in Moran's bowl. Same? Moran's head snapped up, surprised at the show of favor slowly crossing his face. Shizun? Thanks for taking care of me these past few days. Wait, had he heard that right? Moran was astonished. Had Chuaning just thanked him for taking care of him? Never once in the entirety of their last lifetime had he ever said such a thing. Chuaning watched as the young man across from him slowly turned red, his eyebrows lifted higher and higher, and his eyes getting rounder and rounder. A tuft of hair even curled up from his head to sway happily back and forth. What? Chu Zongshi didn't quite know how to react, but he had to preserve his dignity, so he took another lofty sip of tea. Ow, my lips. Truth be told, during the days he'd spent by Moran's side as Shasani, Chuaning had begun to feel a little guilty. When he thought about it late at night, he had to admit that his personality really was too harsh, and he had been overly stern with Moran. So he told himself that, when he returned to normal, he would no longer carry on in that way, that he would do better. When Chuaning had met with the Shenji elder at Peach Blossom Springs, he had hemmed and hawed for a good long while before finally forcing the words past his lips and asking how to be less intimidating to disciples. Oh, that's so sweet. I love that. Okay. Shenji had understandably been taken aback before answering. First, you have to actually show them that you care. That is very true. Show them that you care? Chuaning assumed that Moran had never had these meatballs before, so he parted his lips to explain. Stewed crab meatballs are made with finely minced, high-quality, streaky pork that has been mixed with shrimp roe, crab meat, and crab roe and rolled into a ball. They are then simmered into a clear broth with bok choy, probably bok choy, right? And finally arranged in a red clay pot for a colorful presentation. Man was thoroughly dumbfounded. What was Chuaning reciting the menu for? He's trying to be nice, okay? However, to Chuaning, patiently introducing new dishes to his disciple was a form of showing care, and so, throughout the course of the meal, Moran tried every dish in turn and got an earful of descriptions that sounded like they had come straight out of Jiangnan recipes. If not for Chuaning's low, soothing voice, Moran probably would have flipped the table and left. Oh my word. Okay. Hey, did you hear that? Lin Yi Rufeng Sect won the last item at Xunyun Pavilion auction. The private booths were divided by bamboo screens, and the people in the next booth over were a bit loud. The conversation drifted easily over to Moran and Chuaning. Chuaning abruptly stopped introducing savory pork trotter jelly to exchange a look with Moran. They listened with rapt attention. The rough-sounding masculine voice was speaking. Of course I have. A holy weapon, right? 300 million gold. Paid on the spot. Ayo, that price. It was more gold than I'll ever see in my lifetime. Sheesh, is that all you care about? Don't you know that Rufeng Sect also spent 50 million on butterfly bone beauty feast? Heavens, aren't you supposed to eat those? Or dual cultivate with them? Can't believe the biggest sect in the world would use such a reprehensible method of cultivation, and right out in the open too. How scandalous. Actually, Su Xiong cultivation restricting through use of beauty feast is perfectly reasonable. It's not in the least bit prohibited. They may look like us, but ultimately they are not human. It's no different from eating fairy fruits to advance yourself. When you get down to it, there's nothing wrong with the practice. Hmm, we'll just have to agree to disagree. Someone else laughed lightly. The one who bought the beauty feast is apparently some young disciple of Ruth's sect who rarely shows his face. A year something she. I heard he looks decent enough. Wouldn't have expected some guy like that to rely on screwing women to cultivate. If you ask me, Roofing Sect is on its last leg. Still another person chuckled. What's wrong with that? Who doesn't love a beauty? Then their conversation turned to rudimentary debates on ethics and morality, nothing worth paying attention to. So Ruthling's sect bought the holy weapon? Trunning repeated quietly. Sounds like it. Trunning seemed troubled. That makes things more difficult. We'll have to go to Ruthling's sect to investigate further. Moran let out a as he remembered something and muttered. Shizun used to be in Ruthling's sect. Don't want to go back? Trunning looked irritated at the mere mention of returning to them. They may be they may be a famed sect in the upper cultivation world, he said, brows furrowed. But I once. Before he could finish, there was a sudden commotion in the main hall. Someone was yelling loudly, Innkeeper, we'll give you 500 gold if you get rid of these people and clear them out at this instant. Our young master is reserving the whole place today. Okay. Hi. Okay, sorry, I skipped over it because I was like too into the story, but let me quickly go back and show you guys this beautiful illustration that we have. It is here. I absolutely love it. It's so beautiful. I kind of secretly wished that we would have gotten the bit with Moran taking care of Chuaning as the illustration for this chapter, but this one's also beautiful, so I'm fine with that. Okay, let me see. Okay, we're 4:05, so I think I'm gonna take my break real quick, and then I'll be right back. Okay, we are back, and I just checked the page count. We're doing quite well today, so I feel like we're basically about 10 pages away from the minimum where I want to be if we want to finish the novel by the end of tomorrow's live stream. So I think we're doing pretty good. Definitely not going to be able to finish this like everything within today's live stream, but still pretty good. Okay, we got some new water, so I guess we can basically go. Okay, chapter 85. This venerable one isn't someone you can simply get rid of with a mere 50 gold. Moran. This man. The innkeeper's apologetic voice drifted over. Goodness, my lord is so generous. 500, just like that? This humble one is flattered. But we must be courteous to all our guests if we hope to keep doing business, so we can't hustle them all out, you see. However, how about this? We have a spacious private room within called the Returning Fog Pavilion. It's reserved for honored guests of means like yourself. Let me show. She didn't get to finish before there was a loud clatter of tables and chairs began overturning. What's there to see? Who the hell cares about your... I can't believe I had to say this. About your Rotting Fog Pavilion. Or Rotting Dog Pavilion? What stupid names is that? We don't want it. Get rid of them and we'll pay you 1,000. Oh, but my lords, look like such scholarly, reasonable people. Surely he won't force such a difficult decision on this humble one, yes. This innkeeper deserves an award for this customer handling because damn. The innkeeper's coyly the innkeeper simpered coyly, lying through her teeth without so much as batting an eye. There are simply too many guests here already. However, if my lord dislikes returning Fog Pavilion, I can certainly offer another room. It's a little smaller, but just as elegant, and I'll throw in an entertainment package with song and dance, free of charge. How's that? She's being more than generous. I'm assuming that this group that is so unreasonable, because I originally assumed it was Rufeng sect that was coming in and asking for the inn to be vacated, but since they're being so rude, I don't think it's Rufeng sect. Now I'm thinking it's that one person who we never got to meet but is always referred to. No, absolutely not. 1,500. Tell them all to get lost. The boorish voice bellowed. Quit dragging your feet. Our young master will be mad if this place isn't ready when he gets here. Wow. 1,000 gold was a lot to an average person, but it was a laughable amount to Moran, the once emperor of the mortal realm. Even the trinkets he had casually thrown at Song Chutong to humor him had been priceless treasures. And so his eyes were round with amusement as he chewed idly on his chopstick, laughing to Chuaning in a low voice. Shizun, Shizun, check it out. That guy thinks he can get rid of us with a mere 1,500. Chuaning shot him a look, then lifted the bamboo curtain to look downstairs. There was a crowd in the main hall. They were dressed in plain clothes that concealed their sect, but every one of them had a high-quality blade glinting at their waist and a fey wolf slobbering by their side. While the value of the blades were indeterminate, the fey wolf had a market price but were next to impossible to come by. Acquiring even one would be no small feat for a minor sect. If each of these people had a fey wolf, they were clearly from a prestigious organization. All the guests had stopped eating to stare apprehensively at the newcomers. It was so quiet inside the hall that one could have heard a pin drop. Suddenly, a white blur flashed into the inn, bright as snow. There was a beat of silence, as everyone took in what it was. Then a burst of frantic clamoring, as all of them scrambled away from it, as the more easily spooked shrieked, "Monster!" It was a snow-white fey wolf, as tall as 3 men, if not more. Its eyes were crimson as blood, its coat as glossy as satin, and its fangs were the length of a grown man's arm, glistening coldly. Damn, okay. I just want to check something. Just give me a second. Okay. Upon that massive vicious beast sat a young man with an arrogant expression. He reclined casually, one leg over the other, and he was dressed in a set of sleek hunting gear over scarlet raiment, raiment with golden embroidered sleeves. He also wore a silver helmet emblazoned with a lion swallowing the sun, and a lock of red tassel that hung from its crown. His weapon, a jesper bow, laid over his knee. As soon as the showy cultivators saw him, they all dropped to one knee with hands pressed to their chests, saying in unison, "Greetings to the young master." "All right already." The young man waved his hand, looking irritated. "You can't even take care of a little thing like this. Greetings, my ass." Moran couldn't help but laugh quietly to Chuaning. If they're greeting an ass, then doesn't that make him the ass? Well, he's not wrong. Chuaning didn't dignify that with a response. The young man sitting atop, I'm assuming that it says stop, but I'm assuming it meant atop the soft fur at the Fey Wolf's nape, looked mad indeed. "Who's in charge of this dump?" The innkeeper was frightened, but she stepped up with a forced calmness, smiling apologetically. "That would be this humble one, my lord." "Oh," he shot her a glance. "I'm going to stay here tonight, but I'm not used to having so many people around. Have a talk with them. I'll make up for your losses. But, my lord, I know that puts you in a tough spot. Here, take this and give each table an apology on my behalf. If anyone really doesn't want to leave, let them be." The young man tossed the innkeeper a pouch, which he opened to find filled with 9 turn return pills that glistened gold within. These pills were allowed the imbiber's cultivation to grow in leaps and bounds for 10 days, and a single pill cost more than 2,000 gold on the market. The innkeeper was at first shocked by this extravagant display, then discreetly breathed a sigh of relief. No cultivator would turn down something like these. With these pills, it would be perfectly acceptable to ask everyone to leave. As the innkeeper went around the table apologizing and offering compensation, the young man yawned before glaring down at his attendants. "All of you are so useless. Do I really have to do everything myself?" The attendants looked at one another, after which there was a scattered response of "Gongzi is ever brilliant and indomitable?" I'm not sure. The guests dispersed in short order. Other than Chuaning and Moran, who didn't care for money and cultivation pools, everyone accepted the recompense and left with zero complaints to go stay elsewhere. Gongzi, everyone else left, but 2 guests declined, the innkeeper reported. They say that as it's already late and one of them is unwell, they don't wish to go elsewhere. Never mind them. No need to hassle an invalid. I don't know how to feel about this guy, cause he's unreasonable, but not like completely unreasonable. So he's not like that far up my annoyed with him list as he could potentially be. Of course, my humble store will certainly provide Gongza with the best. Our chef's signature dishes are crab meatballs, savory pork, torture jellies, crab meatballs. The young man was obviously not from South and didn't much care for their cuisines. He blinked at the name of the dishes, then waved his hand with a frown. Pass, I can't even begin to understand these ridiculous names. Maybe he was just some insanely rich merchant, and not a cultured young master after all. The innkeeper paused for a long moment. Then what would Gongza like? We will do our utmost to serve. Easy, the young man gestured at his attendants. 5 caddies of beef for each of them, 10 for me, and then a caddy of sojo, and 2 legs of lamb. That'll do to tide us over. One shouldn't eat too much late at night anyway. That sounds like a lot to me. Wow. Moran turned to Chuaning, meaning to make fun of the guy's bottomless appetite. However, he found... Sorry. Why am I struggling so much now? Let me just... However, he found Chuaning staring fixedly at the young man with an indecipherable, hazy expression. Shizun seems to know him, Moran said absently. Moran had said it offhandedly and hadn't expected Chuaning to actually confirm. He tripped over his own words in surprise. Huh? Then who is he? The only son of the Rufeng sect's leader, Chuaning said softly. Nan Gong Si. Moran fell silent. No wonder Chuaning knew him. He had once been the Lin Yi Rufeng sect, been with the Li Ying Rufeng sect after all. Of course he knew what the sect leader's son looked like. It was also no wonder that Moran himself didn't know the guy, as by the time he had gone around butchering Rufeng sects in his previous lifetime, this youth had already up and died from some illness. Oh damn, okay. At the time, he had assumed that the son of the sect leader must have been a sickly cripple. Ugh, I don't like that. But the fellow in front of them was healthy, lively, and had ego to spare. How could a guy like this have died of illness? Some kind of sudden plague, maybe? Downstairs, Nan Gongsu was happily digging in. He inhaled all 10 caddies of beef and both legs of lamb in no time at all, and gulped down not a few bowls of wine on top of that. Moran watched speechlessly from upstairs. Shizun, isn't Rufeng sect all about refinement and stuff? What's up with their young master? He's got even fewer manners than our Shu Mingming. Chuaning shoved Moran's head away from where it was nosed over, even though his own face was still turned to peer at the scene downstairs. Don't make up nicknames for your fellow disciples. Moran laughed and was about to say something else when he paused, suddenly realizing something. Chuaning's finger was pressed against his forehead, pushing him away. In the process, his sleeve draped softly over Moran's face like a wisp of mist. The sleeve was made of extremely light material, like silk or satin, but not quite, and it felt both warm and cold, almost like water. Back in the room, when he'd been reeling with desire and unable to tug off Chuaning's robes, he'd thought the robes had been too tightly bound. When he examined them now, Moran realized that they were made of frozen mist silk from Kunlun Tashu Palace. Kunlun Tashu Palace was the most aloof and detached sect in the upper cultivation realm. Its disciples were inducted at age 5, and 1 year later they were sent into seclusion to cultivate in the sacred land of Kunlun. There they were compelled to stay until they managed to cultivate their spiritual cause. Ooh, this is like an interesting bit of world building. Although spiritual cores were innate and cultivation merely awakened them, it was still a long process that often took 10 or 15 years. As others were barred from entering the sacred land during that time, The disciples' needs were a basic problem. Food was one thing, as the sacred land was adjacent to Wangmu Lake, so the Tashu Palace disciples could always go fishing for sustenance. However, it wasn't like they could weave their own clothes. Okay, the birds are like going crazy right now. I don't know if it's like bothering you guys. I hope not. But I know it's probably quite audible. Just let me know. Should I continue reading? Should I wait? I don't really want to wait because that's such a time waster. But if it's a bother, then maybe. Okay, let's just keep going. And so their sect had invented frozen mist silk. Clothes made from this silk were not only light as mist, they were also enchanted to be naturally impervious to common dust and grime. They thus didn't need washing unless they were splashed by substances, like blood. The most amazing property of the silk was its ability to morph in accordance to the wearer's body. Which is why he can wear it as shini as well. Makes sense. This was an absolute necessity for disciples of Tashu Palace, who entered the sacred lands as small children at 5 years old, and who couldn't leave until they were young adults of 15 or 20. Clothes made of frozen mist silk would grow with them, so during these long years, they always had clothes that fit. What was Chuaning doing, wearing robes made of this special material? Moran squinted, a spark flashing through his mind. He suddenly felt like something was off, like he had been mistaken about something from the very start. What was it? Excuse me, may I ask where I might find the innkeeper? Moran's thoughts were interrupted by a confident yet friendly and courteous voice. He looked down to see the group of Rufeng sect disciples who had been at Shenyun Pavilion earlier. The one at the lead was leaning halfway inside, his crane-patterned mantle fluttering as he held the door curtain open with his sword. I can't believe we're so close to the end. I'm getting very sad looking at the amount of pages that we have left. Wan perked up. Aren't those Yewangxi's people? Rufeng sect had 72 cities, so its disciples often didn't know one another, and Nan Gongse was sitting by himself in a private booth with his back to the door. Thus the guy of the newcomers glanced over their fellow sect disciples inside the inn, who were dressed in plain clothes and didn't recognize any of them. Yewangxi versus Nan Gongse. This was sure to be entertaining. My apologies, but we've already been reserved for tonight. The innkeeper hurried over while silently cursing herself for forgetting to close up shop. Please turn your attention elsewhere. We're truly so sorry. The young man at the lead looked troubled as he sighed. What to do? We've already checked the other inns, and they're all full. There's a frail young lady with us who's in dire need of rest, so we were hoping to find somewhere for her to get a good night's sleep. Might I trouble you to ask for the one who reserved this inn could consider letting us have a few rooms? That he probably won't be willing. The young man bowed. Please ask anyway, he implored politely. It's all right if he turns us down. The innkeeper didn't get a chance to respond when one of Nan Gongse's attendants at the nearest table slapped the surface and stood outraged. What's there to ask? Get out! Out! Don't disturb our young master while he's eating. That's right. Aren't you embarrassed? Taking a woman to bed while wearing Rufeng sect uniform? Dragging your sect's name through the mud? That's awfully presumptuous of you. The young man hadn't expected such a misunderstanding. Why do you slander us so? He said indignantly as he turned bright red. We of Rufeng sect have always been principled and virtuous. Of course we wouldn't conduct ourselves with such impropriety. This young lady was kindly saved by our young master. How dare you speak such nonsense? Your young master? Nangong's attendant glanced towards the private booth. His own young master was still drinking wine, taking no notice of them, which he took as silent permission to chase out the interlopers. He relaxed and snickered loudly. Everyone knows there's only one young master of Rufung's sect. I wonder who this young master of yours is. A gentle, graceful voice came from outside the door. That would be me, Ye Wangxi of Rufung's sect. Every head in the room turned towards the door. Ye Gongzi. Ye Wangxi was dressed in all black, his handsome face taking a delicate cast in the candlelight. He stepped inside, followed by the veiled woman with nervous eyes, Song Chi-tong. Moran eyed the girl. The vein at his temple throbbed viciously at the mere sight of her. Her again. Just his luck. Nangong's attendants were momentarily taken aback by Ye Wangxi's appearance. Then contempt surfaced on the faces of some of the less composed members of their group. Ye Wangxi was the adopted son of Rufung sect's chief elder, and he had once been attached to the sect's Shadow City. As implied by the name, the Shadow City specialized in training the Shadow God. The leader of Rufung sect had originally... Today is very noisy, apparently. The leader of Rufung sect had originally wanted Ye Wangxi to be trained as the next leader of the Shadow Guard. However, the nature of Ye Wangxi's cultivation had turned out to be unsuitable for the cultivation method of the Shadow God, so he had been reassigned to the main city and now acted as the sect leader's right-hand man, which means that he probably can't be touched, I hope for his sake. Due to his upbringing as the Shadow God, Ye Wangxi habitually kept a low profile, and very few people knew him. However, the sect leader held him in extremely high esteem, so much so that, in recent years, there had been rumors within the sect that Ye Wangxi was actually the sect leader's bastard. Perhaps because of this, Nangong's legitimate heir, was on bad terms with the other young man. Of course, this couldn't just go smoothly. Since their young master disliked Ye Wangxi, it was only natural that his attendants shared his low opinion of him. While they were obligated to avoid offending Ye Gongzi as his juniors, there were also Nangong's personal attendants who directly reported to him. So, after a long moment of awkward frozen silence, one of the less reserved attendants laughed coldly. Well, Ye Gongzi, please take your leave. I'm afraid there is no place for you here. Gongzi, they say there is no room, so let's go look elsewhere. Song Chi-tong tugged at the hem of Ye Wangxi's clothes with slender fingers, a note of fear in her voice. Besides, this place is so expensive, I dare not waste any more of Gongzi's money. Upstairs, Moran rolled his eyes. It was always that weak, pitiful tone with her. She had tricked him with it in the past, and now she was manipulating Ye Wangxi the same way. Ye Wangxi was about to speak when an enormous white shadow darted out from the inner room, heading straight for his back. Gongzi, watch out! Song Chi-tong cried out in alarm. Ow! Woo! Howling loudly, a snow-white fey wolf lunged towards Ye Wangxi and started excitedly running in circles around him. No one said a word. Ye Wangxi looked down in shock at the three-man tall fey wolf that was rolling adorably around on the floor. Nabaji? I know it's very bad. I what this book hasn't had me done. It had me do. Oh, my English is just going out the window today. It was Nangong's fey wolf mount named Now for its eyes, the scarlet who of the uh, Cornelians, Bai for its coat white as snow, and Jin for the gold of its claws. If Nabanjin was here, then so was Nang Gongse. Yewangshi obliged the big furry head that was nudging towards him for pets while looking around. The bamboo curtain was lifted by a hand that extended from a scarlet, gold embroidered sleeve. Leaning idly against the wall of the private room with his arms crossed, irritated expression half covered by the curtain and holding a bottle of wine in hand, Nangongse shot Yewangshi a glance and sneered. Interesting. Why do you always show up wherever I go? With the way you always trail after me, where am I to put my face if people start gossiping about you? Um, I mean, I could ship that. I don't know if it's gonna be a ship, but I could ship it. Uh, like enemies to lovers, why not? We have like the main couple doing it. This could be a good parallel. Uh, chapter 86. This venerable one's ex-wife isn't low maintenance. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Yewangshi visibly choked at these words, but he didn't grow angry and instead took a moment to gather himself. You've misunderstood. I'm here on sect leader's orders to purchase something from Shunyan Pavilion, not to follow you. Moran and Chuaning exchanged a glance. The holy weapon. Nangongse swung the jar of wine dangling from his hand. His face darkened even further. So father's asked you to fetch his things now, huh? What? Do I have no hands or legs that could do it for him? Asa, that's not what I meant. Who said you could call me that? Nangongse lowered his brows in a scowl, lightning crackling in his eyes. Yegongse, don't think you can be impudent to me because father is blinded enough to be friendly with you. Aren't you disgusted with yourself? I called you that as the sect leader's behest. If you dislike it, you can bring it up with him. Yewangshi paused for a few moments. What's the point in taking it out on me? Don't you use father against me. Nangongse drew in a breath and forced himself to regain his composure. There was a cold light in his dark eyes, like a silvery moon in a night sky saturated with bacon smoke. Interesting description. Okay, I like just like as a shipper. Let's just quickly talk about what went through my brain. it's not gonna happen, but it was like maybe it can be an AU. Who knows? Imagine if like they obviously hate each other at this point. But what if they ended up like getting together at some point, really liking each other, and then Song Chi Tong like sees it as a threat to her like position and trust that she's gained from Ye Wangxi, so she poisons um Nang Gongse, and that's why he dies so abruptly in the past. It's just a thought. I don't know. I have to entertain myself somehow. I'm not sure. Ye Gongze. He seems to drag out the name. I'm afraid that father told you to call me Ase because he has certain misconceptions about your position in the sect. I'd advise you to know your place. You were given an inch, don't take a mile. After all, no matter what kind of airs you put on, by birth alone, you'll never be my equal. A hint of something dark seemed to flash across Ye Wangshi's refined features. He lowered his thick curtain of lashes. The young master is right, he said quietly, but I have never once thought myself to be the young master's equal. The change in the form of a dress made Nangongse feel a bit better. He lifted the jar and downed some of its contents. The wine burned his throat, but he had always been able to hold his liquor. He stared at Yewangshi for a long while, then scoffed and waved a hand. That's what I thought. Just look at how you are now. How could you possibly... Possibly what? Elaborate, please? He caught himself before letting something... Sorry. He caught himself before letting slip something he shouldn't in public and abruptly pressed his lips together, saying no more. A long silence stretched out. As for Yewangshi, even after being humiliated and insulted, his lashes were still lowered. No one could tell if his eyes held any anger or indignation. He gave the onlookers nothing beyond calm, gentle face, dauntless yet reserved. The atmosphere was uneasy in the extreme. Nangongse looked around uncomfortably for a bit before his gaze landed on the woman behind Yewangshi. As if to cover up his near blunder, he cleared his throat and tipped his chin towards her. Someone you saved? Where is she even from? Don't be bailing out random people. It's all right. She's from Shenyun Pavilion's auction. Nangongse had no interest in the auction, nor had he wasted any time looking into it, but he was duly surprised to hear that Song Chitong had been bought there. His initial unconcerned gaze sharpened as he stared at Song Chitong's face for a while. So is this thing slave-bonded, or a butterfly-boned beauty feast? In the cultivation world, only two types of people could be openly bought and sold: butterfly-boned beauty feasts and the slave-boned. Oh, slave-boned, not slave-bonded. Where did I go wrong? The slave-boned were those born of the union between humans and fae. People feared the inhuman nature of such crossbreeds, so once they were found out, their vital energy was destroyed, and a curse was cast to place a slave mark on the bone of their shoulder and shoulder blades. They were henceforth condemned to servitude. Oh my word, this world is so corrupt and cruel and ugh. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised because we had Moran as the emperor in the previous lifetime, so, but still, damn. And this is like supposed to be the better version, like the version before Moran ruined everything. Okay. However, the slave-boned didn't go for much and were by no means rare. They usually ended up being either servants of the largest sects or playthings of the rich and powerful. Shenyang Pavilion wouldn't bother auctioning some run-of-the-mill things like that. Sure enough, Yewangshi replied, a butterfly-boned beauty feast. Newly interested, Nangongse walked past Yewangshi to look at Song Chitong, circling around her like he was inspecting mere merchandise. He frowned. What's wrong with its leg? Is it defective or something? This man is getting on my nerves. Nangongse... Oh, sorry. She was injured when they captured her. They applied a salve. It's healing, Yewangshi said. That's why we can't walk too far, and we're hoping to stay here tonight. Nangongse said nothing, only narrowed his eyes. Then he suddenly dove to the side of Song Chitong's neck and took a long whiff, like a feral wolf. Ugh! The lecherous movement frightened her so much that she paled, frozen in place, while clutching her clothes like she was about to faint. This is so gross. Doesn't smell any different from normal people. Nangongse rubbed his nose and sneezed. Some kind of perfumed powder? Waving his hand, he asked her offhandedly, how much? He asked offhandedly, how much? 50 million. Silver? Gold. Nang Kongse's eyes flew wide. Ye Wangshi, are you crazy? Do you know how many top grade whetstones that would be? And you freaking bought a woman to bring back to me? What? Is Rufeng sect money not money to you? You're misunderstanding, and I'm trying very, very hard not to, be angry about it. I didn't use the sect's money, Yewangshi paused, and I didn't buy her for you. You! The anger that had only just subsided roared back to life. I see how it is, Nangongse sneered. He glared at Song Chitong, growing more irritated the more he looked at her. That veil straight up pissed him off, so he ordered her, You, take that frickin' rag off your face. Song Chitong, spooked, clutched tightly at Yewangshi's sleeve. Ye Gongse, she said in a pitiful voice as she shrank behind him. I don't want to. Yewangshi's slender figure wasn't as tall or muscular as Nangongse, but there was no fear in his eyes as he tilted his head slightly to look up at the other youth. Young master, she doesn't want to. Just let her be. You talk too much. You saved her. So she owes Rufeng Sect her life, and that means she has to listen to me. Take it off. No. He saved her. So even by your logic, if she owes anyone anything, it would be Ye Wangshi, not you. This has nothing to do with you, good sir. Okay. I saved her, yes, but the moment I did, I also set her free, Yewangshi said. So please don't force her, young master. Who do you think you are, Yewangshi? Nangongzi punched the door frame in anger. What do you take me for? Why the hell would I listen to you? If I tell her to take it off, then she damn well better take it off. I'll let you guys stay if she takes this stupid thing off. Otherwise, get the hell out. Yewangshi sighed, almost imperceptibly, before turning to Song Chitong. Let's leave. This time, Dang Gongse wasn't the only one to choke. Yewangshi had the holy weapon with him. There was no way Moran and Chuaning could let him go. Go stop him, Chuaning said immediately. Okie dokie. Moran had been thinking the same thing anyway, but he paused. Shizun, where will we sleep, though? He can have half of our room. Moran looked uneasy for some reason. That's probably not a good idea. Chuaning's gaze flickered slightly upwards. Why not? There are some things Shizun doesn't know. It's best if we don't stay in the same room as him. Besides, he wouldn't agree to it anyway, since he's actually what? Moran, what do you know? Please share with the class. Oh my word, okay. There's so much going on in my head, but also the fact that, Chuaning is just ordering Moran around, and he's like, okie dokie, here I go. I can't. Moran was just getting to the important bit when he was interrupted by the sound of Nang Gongse kicking over a table downstairs. Cups and dishes clattered to the floor, followed by a screech as he dragged over a bench and put his foot on it to bellow, Who said you could leave? What are you rebelling, or some nonsense? Get back here. Even Nang Gongse's attendants looked on in flustered silence now. Young master, weren't you the one who told them to get out? He was indeed. However, Yewangshi seemed more than accustomed to Nang Gongse's unreasonable temper tantrum. He pretended not to have heard anything as he tapped Song Chitong on the shoulder and gestured at her to ignore the crazy person behind them. My word. Okay, what is the time? We have 5 minutes left. Yewangshi! Yewangshi did not respond. Yewangshi! Still no response. Yewangshi! The vein at Yewangshi's temple twitched, and he looked back despite himself, only to be unexpectedly met with an oncoming wine jar hurtling directly towards him. Pupils contracting, he was about to dodge when a blur of white flashed in front of him. Oh my word, the blurs of white are so many. Ah! Okay, that was not a good sound anyway. A delicate voice cried out in pain, startling everyone in the room, especially Ye Wangxi and Nang Gongse. Song Chitong had blocked the hit for Ye Wangxi in the nick of time. She was bleeding profusely from where the heavy jar of red clay had struck her forehead. She touched the blood with a trembling hand as fair as jade, and tears of pain sprang to her eyes. "Don't touch it. Let me see. I'm okay, as long as Gongze didn't get injured." "Can't you talk without throwing things?" Yewangshi said in a sullen tone, shooting Nang Gongse a blame-laden glare before turning to one of his attendants. "Get the Jinchuang medicine." Yeah, questionable sound effects indeed. Gongze, we ran out, the attendant said quietly. "Should I go buy some?" Nang Gongse hadn't seen this coming either. He forced himself to remain calm, but there was a hint of guilt in his eyes. I have some," he mumbled with a stiff expression. "Alan, fetch my medicine bag." Yewangshi, still angry, pressed his lips into a thin line and ignored Nang Gongse. For a good while, Nang Gongse stood there stiffly, holding a little bottle of medicine, but Yewangshi didn't so much as glance at him the entire time. However, Nang Gongse couldn't sacrifice his pride, so he roughly shoved the bottle at Song Chitong instead. "Here, use it if you want, I don't care." Song Chitong was like a frightened little deer. She first looked shakily towards Yewangshi, and only accepted the medicine when she saw that while he was silent he wouldn't stop her. She then lowered her head in a bow to the person who had injured her, as she said quietly, "Thank you, Nang Gongse." Sorry, let's try that again. "Thank you, Nang Gongse." Hey. Nang Gongse hadn't expected thanks from the girl whose skull he had nearly cracked open. He was taken aback for a second before snapping out of it and waving a hand with an embarrassed cough. "No problem." Okay. That night, Yewangshi's group ended up staying at the inn after all. A multitude of candles flickered throughout the establishment like a scattering of stars in the sky. Moran sat by a window with his cheek in his hand as his thoughts wandered. It had been nearly 2 years since his rebirth, and numerous events had differed quite significantly from what he had seen in his past lifetime. It was strange, watching the same people do different things. Song Chitong, Yewangshi, Bugui. With the passing of time, these familiar people and objects from his past life had once again reappeared in this one. Only this time, he absolutely would not take Song Chitong to be his wife. As for Ye Wangxi, his name would soon resound throughout the cultivation world, second to none but Chuaning. What's the time? Oh goodness. And then there was Bugui. Agitation flooded Moran's chest when he thought about the long blade that had accompanied him through his past lifetime. "Shizun? Yes? You've been working on that talisman for over an hour already. Is it done yet?" "Almost." By the dim light of the candle, Chuaning carefully drew the finishing strokes with a brush dipped in cinnabar to reveal a vivid, elaborate illustration of a soaring dragon. Moran shuffled over to look. "What's that?" "Rising Dragon Array." "What does it do?" "It can detect all spells in an area, big or small. If our mysterious culprit intended to use the holy weapon to test for the essence of others' spiritual roots, there is sure to be some kind of trace left on the blade. This way, we'll know if the weapon's appearance was mere coincidence or part of his plan." "Wow, neat! But then, why didn't Shizun use this back at Shenyan Pavilion?" "You'll understand once I awaken it." Chuaning pricked his finger and brushed the blood across one of the dragon's scales. The little dragon on the paper instantly glowed gold as eyes and tail moving nimbly. Are you a real dragon? Asked Chuaning. The squeaky voice came from the paper. Yep, this venerable one is a real dragon. Prove it. Stupid mortal. What's there to doubt? I'll know you to be a real dragon if you can jump off this page. What's so hard about that? Just give the venerable one a sec. Huh! There was a flash of gold light, and a mighty little dragon the size of a palm leapt out of the paper, wiggling its body and baring its fangs. It flew circles around Chuaning, quite pleased with itself and making a fuss. Ha! I'm a dragon big and real, it boasted. I know lots of secrets, but I'm not going to tell you, not going to tell you. Chuaning's eyes, clear as icy lake, swept coldly over the little eel before he covered it under a cupped hand and turned to Moran with a deadpan expression. You see? I see. Let me go, you stupid mortal. You're messing up this venerable one's whiskers. That is quite cute. Chuaning lifted a hand and curtly poked the blood-colored inverted skull at the dragon's throat. Shut up and get to work. Oh my word. Oh goodness, I have so many thoughts and now I can't think of any of it. But I am vaguely concerned that the spell that Chuaning just cast might also reveal the fact that he is currently of two bodies, shall we say? Or of two forms. Okay. I want a pet real dragon that's not real. That's so cute. Yeah. Okay, so that is the end of today's read-along. We made decent progress. I think we might be done within like an hour's time for the last few pages, because it's only about, let's see, it's only 19 more pages. Sorry, I wanted to say pages and chapters in the same word and it did not work out. 19 more pages, so probably we're gonna be done in like the first hour, and I might just like, depending on how it goes, might just do a short thoughts afterward, like thoughts section afterwards, and then we shall end it. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you thought, and thank you so much for joining me as always. But otherwise, I'll see you guys again tomorrow. 再见。